Welcome and thank you for checking in at the Inner Game of Change podcast, where I focus on exploring the multi-layers of managing organizational change. My guests cover a diverse number of critical topics to enable effective and sustainable change in the workplace. My name is Ali Juma, and you're listening to the Inner Game of Change podcast. My guest today is Antonio Nieto-Rodriguez. Antonio is a global champion of project management and author of the Harvard Business Review Project Management Handbook, which was released late last year. As well as discussing his book, Antonio argues that we're living in a project economy, and projects are the lingua franca of the business and personal worlds, from the C-suite to managing your careers. I am grateful to have Antonio sharing his thoughts on reimagining project management. So, Antonio, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining the Inner Game of Change podcast. I am grateful for your time.
Thank you, Ali. It's a pleasure to be here in your podcast, The Inner Game of Change. I've been listening to some of the episodes, and I think we're pretty much aligned on our views about change and projects and project management. So I look forward to this interview.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And so, Antonio, you are in Brussels now. Do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure, Ali. Well, I'm from Spain, from Madrid, but I had been brought up in different countries, early on Mexico, Italy, the US. So I feel like now in Belgium, the Netherlands. So I feel very much international. And I think maybe that's one of my passions for projects, because every time you move, that's a project, right?
Yes.
So I've been working in corporations, large companies like PwC, BNP Paribas, GSK, in the field of project management, transformation, director of PMO. So I'm consider myself as a practitioner. I keep my grounds on the feet. What I talk about usually is the things that I use at work. It's not concepts that are mostly theoretical. So I think maybe that's a distinguished factor. And then since about 20 years, I've been fascinated by teaching. I was not a good student. I didn't like the methods. I realized first I thought it was me that I was a bad student, but I thought then the methods at the time were very outdated. And when I did an MBA, my mind shifted radically. I love to learn by case studies and by projects. And I said, well, project management should be like that. Project management should be taught in an exciting way, in an easy way for people who want to learn, not in a very heavy, complicated way. So that set my path into teaching and then writing. So it's a bit of a mix, but I'm passionate about project management. That led to maybe one of my highlights. I was the chairman of the Project Management Institute globally in 2016. I was 6 years in the board. So, I've contributed as much as I can so far into making project management more visible and more appreciated by organizations and senior leaders.
Fantastic. And you've written the book. Today's topic is really fleshing out or talking about some topics that you've raised in your book. Your book is called the Harvard Business Review Project Management Handbook, and it's basically written in a beautiful, simple, inspiring language, modern way of approaching the project management discipline or the practice. What compelled you to write the book? Is it frustration, or is it your knowledge that you wanted to share?
Great question, Ali. And just to be honest with you and the listeners, I didn't expect to write another book. I published 2 books in 2019. And you or the listeners who publish a book, I think everybody can publish books. It takes time. It's a tough project, but I think we all have knowledge to share. But anyway, I published 2 books because I was working on my second book, which was the Project Revolution, where I started to talk about the project economy, which is a centerpiece of the HBR book. Yep. But then Penguin said, well, listen, Antonio, we're launching our new business series and we want to put project management as one of the key topics, actually. So I said, okay, but I just finished another book. So, but okay, I think the opportunity to publish with Penguin on the business, it was a dream, like making happening that people will look at management and see project management, which was not the case. And then once I was done with these two books, suddenly HBR says, hey, Antonio, we want to renew our guide. It's about 10 years old in project management. Do you mind, or would you like to write that? And I was exhausted, Ali, to write. I thought no books in the next 5 years. But if HBR says, do you want to refresh, rewrite, reinvent project management with us? I said yes. And that's the true reason. It was maybe not the right timing, but I could not say the opportunities happen and you need to take them. So that was basically the inside story of this book.
And that's a fantastic project, writing a book. Yeah. It takes a lot of effort, energy, and discipline to write anyway, even if you want to write an article, let alone a great book like this. Let's start with your big statement. It is the project economy that we're going through nowadays. Can you elaborate on this statement?
Sure. And my passion in project management started maybe the first time I was working in a project for a large telecom company. I noticed that projects were very complex to manage. And then I started to think, but if one project is difficult to manage, how do companies manage many projects, right? This company had like 400 projects. And I said, wow, this must be like incredible. So my passion of kind of what we call in this field portfolio management and doing work project-based, it started very early. And what I noticed is that there was a trend. The trend was operations were getting more efficient. There was much more automation over years, but companies and people would have more projects, right? You would have operational people, but on top of that, they would have more projects every year. So I noticed that there was a shift between operations and projects. And this is what I call the projectification of organizations of work, which led to the term the project economy. And basically it says that in the past, projects were used to be temporary tasks, right? You do that where operations were permanent. And what I think now in a world driven by change is that changes and projects are permanent. That's the core now. And operations are temporary and tasks until the next change. So I just feel that this is all happening right now, where most of the people, I say 60 to 80% of the employees will be working project-based, but they're not prepared for that. And that was one of the goals of the book, is bring these people some tools, including senior leaders who, sorry if you're listening and you're saying, most of them don't have a clue about how to manage a project, how to sponsor a project. So that's what I call the project economy. On a macro level, just briefly, is that when we hear governments and around the world saying we're going to invest trillions of dollars into the economy, that means that we're going to see around us, to rebuild the countries and healthcare systems, more projects in the next decade than we've ever seen before. So on a macro level, there's going to be huge amount of projects. So those two areas is what I call the project economy.
Which means that it's no longer okay for people in an organization to think that a project is temporary. Therefore, once they finish, I'm going to go back to my BAU job. It's actually the other way around. We should no longer think about projects as, disruptions to our operations. Projects are actually enablers, and that they will be there. So I had an interview with an international change practice specialist, and basically what she said is that change is there, change is going to happen, so get used to it. And so your message is the same in a different way, to say projects are there, and they are there to stay, and they'll be more permanent than operations.
That's correct. Ali, I look at some statistics for my book, and if you see the amount of revenues brought by new products, for example, in organizations, research from Booz Allen Hamilton, you could see an increase of 20% of profits in 1982, 22% of profits were brought by new products. And it had risen recently in 40 years to 50%. That means that 50% of the revenues of an organization come from new projects that have to deliver fast. The life cycle of products it has shrunk by 50% or so. There is no product that lasts more than 2-3 years. So that I think there's indicators that confirm this, research that confirms that companies need to embrace projects as a core, while operations more and more is being outsourced to the cloud, right? So Amazon web services, and they do a lot of what used to be internally operations. So I think that's really what I'm talking about when we're saying projects have become the core and operations have become more like the second in priorities.
In your book, you talked about that it's no longer about chief operation officer. You probably consider calling them a chief projects officer. Yeah,
that's a bit provocative.
I know. The COOs will not like you now.
Will not like it, but I think many of them a few that I talk, they see this trend happening. Before they were managing lots of people, now they're managing machines and robots, and so the shift who's managing the people is mostly project leaders and project transformations, and so that shift is happening. So that's why I say that with the project economy, there are significant radical changes, like the COO, Chief Operating Officers. They're dead. We don't need them. That would lead to chief transformation officers, chief project officers who oversee this huge amount of projects for an organization. That's my vision. Fantastic. And you talked about the two competing models. So we're going from efficiency to transformation. We're going from operations to projects. We're going from a yearly budget to a project-based budget. Do you want to elaborate on that? Yeah, it's called also academically organizational ambidexterity. So exploitation versus exploration, there's different terms, but basically, yes, the focus over the last 50 years has been on efficiency, on productivity, on higher volumes, less cost, automation. And we built organizations for that. Leaders created hierarchies and business units and departments and cultures. Great for that. I think we did well. If you look at efficiency, we've improved that. We need less people in factories today, there's no doubt, than 20, 40 years ago. But now that model is gone. Now we're talking, okay, nice, well done for the last 50 years, but now we need to reinvent ourselves. If you're a startup, no problem. You start straight on that more agile change type of organization, flatter organization. But if you're an established company where you still need to keep, because I'm not saying just move from the old to the new, I'm saying keep what is working, but then embrace a more change-driven organization. That's where I think most of the companies are struggling. How much do I keep of what I'm doing right now? How much do I change? And that's a big question. I'm trying to support some leaders around the world, and it's not easy. I don't have the magic formula, Ali. I just know this is a big, complex matter that has been brought up also by HBR in their magazine. So it's just very exciting times. Indeed. I think what I liked about, and it actually made me think, as a professional in my own practice, I service clients. And then I do talk about standardization of processes or the changes and embed them and standardize. But then one point that you raised in your book, which is we need to think about moving away from standardization to evolution or to transformation. Because it's never static, and because the market is so dynamic that an organization or a team in an organization would need to respond with agility and focus as well. That's really what made me think around when I start thinking about my practice in the change management space, which I'm going to
cover with you in a second. I'll have to think that if projects are going to be the permanent and constant factor in an organization, then that will have an impact on the way we communicate the change. We train people, we build capability, and then, some people call it change resilience and whatever you want to call it. And that will need to be really factored in for the organization to build as a capability for their people.
Absolutely agree. Ali, I developed a new name after talking to so many people and being questioned. The project economy, we can see that in our organizations. We have more projects than ever, and we struggle with that. But they ask me, what's the difference between what you're talking about and the gig economy, right?
Yeah.
We all talk about the gig economy for the past decade, 10 years. And the gig economy exactly was that you could work as an independent and support companies in a project, in a transformation. And then once the project was over, the independent people, consultants will move into other companies to do our projects. And what I say is the difference now, which is hugely different, is that the gig economy is happening within your organization. So people are becoming independent, still salaried for you, but imagine independent where you put them together in a project, and then once the project is complete, they move into another project. So I call it the gig economy within organizations. And then people start to realize, okay, that makes sense. It's far from where we are now, right? Because everybody has a box, but this is just another way to expressing that this is project-based is the norm, is exciting. It has to be embraced.
And then I like how you described, or actually you went back to the historical root of the word project, which is an action-based. And I do believe also that change is doing change. We are not making changes, we're actually doing, and we are in the business of action. One thing that you mentioned in your book, which I really like, and I can't be loud enough about it. You talked about outputs-based or focused projects versus inputs-focused projects. Do you want to elaborate on that, Antonio?
Sure, Ali. And I think for everything that we do, there is a reason at the origins. All these things were making sense. And like you say, I like to investigate what happened. And if you look at project management, the modern one started after the Second World War, reconstruction of Europe through the Marshall Plan. And what governments were looking at the time was, please make me a schedule, make me estimates, which are the most accurate possible. And the focus of those methodologies were on scheduling, on estimation, on risk management, very much inputs items. And it was great for that time. Many of the projects were public sector, so it was making sense that you would hand over the project to somebody else to run it later on. That you would not be involved in the innovation part because these were things that the public sector was already coming with the idea. So, but the problem for me was that these methodologies didn't evolve and they stayed very much as in the past. And then Agile came into place and of course wiped away all these concepts and brought different focuses to projects. There were still projects. Nobody says that when Agile came, there were no projects, the same. But we see today with digital transformation projects, we're using many of the Agile techniques. They fail. The failure rate is even higher. So, but basically what I say is that what people care about your project is not the inputs, it's not the deliverables, it's not the tool, it's not the software, it's not the building. They want to use it. And that's where I kind of really put a big emphasis is, let's talk. Let's think about the benefits, the outputs, the impact, the sustainability implications, the social impact. Let's broaden not just on the return on investment, but look further than that. And that's where I'm really trying to convince project managers. I usually don't talk to project managers. I don't teach them. But when I talk to them, I say, listen, you need to focus on the benefits. I don't want a plan with deliverables. I don't care, really.
Yeah.
I just want a plan with benefits.
Yeah. And so you're talking about what is the real impact of this particular change, rather than I've met my timeline, I've met my budget cost, and I made everybody happy. But this is similar to, it's a bad joke, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's like a doctor who followed the whole process and they ticked all the boxes, but the patient dies.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like, what's the point of you following the process if the actual patient dies? And then I talk about now that project managers, or actually whoever hires the project managers, would need to link their success factors to the final outcome. So all the way to the satisfaction of the change and how people feel about it, rather than I've just ticked it and therefore my job is done. So I really like that, and I like that chapter in your book. You've also put in there a benefits card, which is a handy tool in your book. You know, whoever's going to get your book, and I really encourage everybody who's listening to get a copy of the book. You don't need to be a project manager to get a copy of the book. You can be a leader, you can be a change manager, you can be any professional in an organization who is interested in what the hell is the project management about. So I really encourage that. What do you think some of the core competencies of a modern project manager? Because you've written the book and you would like everybody to reimagine project management going forward. So you've got competencies in the past. And what are the new competencies that you think a project manager would need for the next 5 years?
Sure. Ali, let me just briefly comment on the benefits card and
please do.
Of the book. I struggle always around the benefit part. I always thought, well, okay, let's do a business case. And what I realized is that most of the business cases are made by a small team, the project lead, the finance maybe, and the sponsor. And what I propose, the benefit card is just a checklist to help people see what type of benefits you can deliver, from financial to market to revenues to cost, but also sustainability, compliance, and can be expanded. It's just a first template. But what I say, which is different, and people listening to your podcast, I think they should think about this. When you are about to start a project, ask your stakeholders, ask the people who are going to be receiving your project, using your project, what do they expect from? Don't impose, don't assume, but just ask the 10 people who are going to be, listen, we're launching this new application. This is what we're expecting to benefit. What do you want from it? Is there anything that you are keen in listening or getting from this? And once you start involving your stakeholders, and many of them will not send return on investment, which has been the focus of most, they will say, no, I want more people using the tool, I want more efficiency, whatever. Then you get their buy-in. And then if your project, if stakeholders don't give you any benefits about your project, don't start it, right? Because they don't see any value. So I think there's a big shift on that point. And that leads to next question, which was the competencies, is I think absolutely we need to understand project management. But I think, and what I talk very strongly in my book too, is that we have been having the wrong battle between methods. And that has been diminishing for the profession. That's why we are not so credible often. The battle was between agile and waterfall project management, but also change management. Why on earth we said change is different than projects, and why don't we converge? I think for me, the competencies of the future PM or change manager, and I don't have any strong preference, whoever you want to call it. I call them end-to-end implementation specialists. To remove a bit is that they need to understand Agile. They need to learn concepts of Agile and Scrum, but also concepts of change management.
Yes.
And Lean Startup. And of course, you need to be stronger in the leadership. I think you mentioned that before, Ali, we thought as project managers, people being delivering deliverables and the plan. And bringing all the accountability of the success of the project, like you were saying, the doctor if the patient dies, that nothing happens. The accountability was somewhere else, the senior sponsor. And that's wrong. Again, that's one of the things that maybe 40, 50 years ago was making sense. You were working in the public sector, but within your companies, the project manager needs to change their mindset and feel accountable of delivering the benefits, not just on time or in budget. Maybe those are the objectives, part of them, but it's the accountability. It's really a radical step change. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm the owner of this project. I'm going to fight for this project. I'm going tomorrow. I'm going to fight for this project because I love it and I want to make it work. And if I need to call the CEO of my company, I call him or her. I call them. I don't wait for a meeting.
Yep.
So it's kind of, you have the usual competence, leadership, emotional intelligence. Yeah. But I think the biggest change is embracing different methodologies, to forget about agile versus change versus projects. All of them, product development is a key one. And then change your mindset. Go for it.
Yeah. And I completely agree. One of the things that I come across often in my practice, Antonio, is that, and it is unfortunate, that when you talk to certain project managers, they say, hey, dealing with people and change, that's your job, not my job. So it's like, and for me, no, you need to be interested in what I'm doing, because that is the output. The ultimate output is that how people are going to accept those changes. And you talked about emotional intelligence. I talk about communication skills for a project manager, their presentational skills, their confidence, and their belief that their project is going to deliver a benefit to community or to customers or to people within an organization. And I am interested in the A to the Z of the project, all the way to how a customer feels or a stakeholder feels about the change. So that's how I see a project manager. And I see them working very closely with the change managers and the sponsors as well. One of the things that I always find interesting is that people classify benefits as tangibles and intangibles. And then I'm thinking, it's crazy nowadays, and in this modern age, we still call some benefits intangibles. I think we need to discard of that and be smart enough and be able to articulate every single benefit.
Absolutely. And I think that's where you can already start your project by getting clear of what people are expecting, right? And then put that in your plan and say, listen, these are the expected benefits, and let's see how we can bring them to life and when. And then the big question I always ask project managers is, how can we make them faster, right?
Yes.
If you say in 2 years, can we do that in 6 months? What do you need to make it in 6 months? So it just flips the conversation from benefits and how can you deliver in them faster in a phased approach. That's fine. Okay. Do then, but moving out from that inward focus, input focus. That's why I challenge also the triple constraints, where many I got a bit of haters sometimes when I talked about this concept. Like, how can you say that the triple constraints it's a bit outdated? And say, well, that's what I think. So
the triple constraints, what are they? They cost, the scope, and time. Yep. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. That's what we use.
I'm trying to test my project management knowledge.
You did very well.
Antonio.
Scope and cost.
Yes. So, Antonio, there's a lot of talk around change fatigue nowadays. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that an organization or a leader would need to start thinking about to enable their teams to live in a constant project-based operations?
I think if you look at, I have many friends who are independent consultants. They've been consultants for 20 years, and they left corporates and they love what they do. It's strange. This change fatigue comes within the organizations. I don't know if you noticed that, but basically most of the change fatigue is for people working within a company, not the externals. The externals are free to choose. So I think what creates change fatigue is that pressure to deliver, pressure where you are dumping projects into people without checking on them, whether are they excited to join? Do they have time for them, right? And you keep piling. And I think there's nothing more stressful for someone than working in 3-4 projects at the same time as you have some operational job. I think people who are 100% focused in one project, it's tough. There will be always difficult moments, but you know where you are and you know where you want to go. And I think the change fatigue comes from many people today in organizations are working in 3, 5, 10 projects at the same time. There's no clear prioritization, so they need to make their own choices of where do I prioritize. Maybe I work on the project that I like more, the project manager, or the one that shouts more and I'm afraid. So I think once companies start to prioritize better their projects, to have less projects, Ali, I always say that in any company you go today, you can kill instantly 50 to 60% of the projects and nothing will happen. So when companies start to focus, which they did with the pandemic, right? 2 years ago, everybody dropped 80%, 90% of the projects. Nobody complained at the time of change fatigue, right? When the pandemic started, we all wanted to make it. We knew where we wanted to go. So I think these are very important concepts that if you don't keep the discipline of applying them, then people will get tired, of course, because we love to compete, we love to contribute. But when it's a mess, the organization, then you get tired.
Yeah, but look, I think it's a great point that you're bringing up in here, which is around how did organizations behave during the pandemic? And can they sustain that behavior, because it actually, some of it paid off. In time of threat, an organization will shrink and start thinking about what's the most essential project that I need to keep, and the rest, who cares? So hopefully leaders will continue with that. Now, you talked about the change fatigue. I mean, change fatigue happens. You called it a lack of prioritization, which obviously that causes the conflict and saturation. And when you have conflict, so you've got 2, 3 projects hitting the same team at the same time, plus I need to still do my job. And that creates the fatigue. And also it's got other consequences, which is my adoption rate will suffer. Nobody's going to be a winner at the end of the day. So projects will be either, a failure or incomplete, probably more incomplete rather than a failure. Right. And I'm going to shift gear now and talk about change management as a change practice as an enabling partner to the project manager. How do you see the role of the change practitioner as a key player in enabling projects? Well,
I see it as crucial, right? Every project is a change. So it's a bit what we were just talking before, is that polarization between agile and traditional project management, waterfall, and then the change makers. And I just didn't get it, why it was split like that. I think there are, of course, different areas where you can develop skills, but everybody can learn from change and from projects so I didn't understand this battle, which I think has been bad, to the point that I have built the project canvas, which is the essential tool.
Yes.
I had a first version on the project canvas in my book, The Project Revolution. And I used the knowledge areas from project management methodologies like PMI or Princeton, where they talk about communication as one of the knowledge area. And I said, today you cannot manage a project, you cannot convince people to change with a communication plan. Maybe you do that 40 years ago where you would announce. So I changed the name of that knowledge area building block in my canvas to change management. I said, there's something wrong in these methodologies. It should be change management. People don't change with a communication plan. You need different techniques. You need to bring the change management experts to use different interventions, methods. And my second version, which comes with the Harvard Business Review project management, I have reduced the number of building blocks to 9 from 14, and one of them is called change. Yeah. So I just want to recognize that this is not a skill that project managers have to strongly develop. I think by nature, you become more more aware. We focus a lot on the soft part, on the stakeholders. But I think that's where the combination of change managers' expertise and project managers, and my wish is that we all converge into this implementation specialist where you need change experts like you and your community to be also driving and change, not just a support, but driving.
Yes. And so I look at projects in general, I look at them in three key players. There's a sponsor, there's a project manager, and there's a change manager. And everybody else operates within that team. And I like how in the book you've created your project canvas, and then you've dealt with every aspect in a different separate chapter, which is really great for the readers to follow that. I focus a lot on the change experience, which means it's not just the product, it's not just the delivery, it's not just the communication, it's not just how we trained people, it's the overall package. Organizations like Apple and those organizations, they always focus on, it's not the mobile, it's how I feel about their product. And this is the shift that I would like to think when we manage projects in however way, agile or waterfall, or I'd like to think that the change experience is going to be a key component for success as part of the success factors for any project. Unless we link it to that, we will not really understand how we're going to improve our game plan going forward when we run other projects.
I like it. I'm not too familiar with the change experience, Ali, so I cannot talk much about it, but I like the concept. I like it's in line with that shift to focus more on the benefits. And a big focus on my concepts has been always the purpose. So what do we want to achieve is not the HR system, it's just making our employees more happy. So I think it's something around those lines, but I'm not very familiar. I do like the concept of focusing on the change experience and that journey to get there. I think that's what people like. I always say to the people is, what do you tell at home? What do you say about your project at home that makes you proud, right?
You're right.
And it's never the deliverable that you're working on. Is the benefits that you're trying to bring for your organization.
And that's where I think the leader of a project or the sponsor, and I work with senior sponsors in every project, and I will coach them and I will ask them to clearly articulate what that change experience would be for a project. And the reason why I talk about this, because at the end of the day, at the end of a project, all organizations run surveys about culture surveys, about engagement surveys. And 9 out of 10 times, people always complain that we haven't been communicated enough with, or they just gave us this new change and nobody told us about it. It came out of nowhere and all of those things. So this is what I call the change experience. Did we communicate with you? Did we communicate enough? Did we train you enough? Did we support you enough? Did we prepare you enough? And then we take that learning and go to the next project. If you've got so many projects happening at the same time, they do this in the U.S. Marines. Around the world, U.S. Marines actually learn from each other. And how do they do that? They do that live, because a unit in Baghdad and a unit in Kabul, how would they know, how would they understand the learnings from that unit? They share that constantly because and they want to achieve that final experience, which is safety, obviously, for those units. And I think based on your book, if it's going to be the project economy, which means you've got a velocity happening, so many projects, we're going to have to keep that learning experience live at all times, and we pivot based on what we learn from the stakeholders.
Yeah, no, I love the stories, and I do believe that it's a radical shift. I think we are in the project economy, but project managers need to do 80% of what they do differently. And it's not because we're there that we can be already claim success. I think that's I talk about success ratios from projects, and they are not great, to not say they're appalling, and we need to step up. And so I really put pressure on project management. That's the community I focus, of course, to step up, to do a lot of learning, to change many things, to take advantage of this opportunity, which is not going to last for many years. If we don't step up, some of the operational people, managers, will step up into the role of project leadership, and many of them will learn to do that. So I see a few years to make these changes, but I completely agree with you, Ali. This is a big change that needs to happen also in these communities.
Thank you for that. And fantastic. We are coming close to the end of the podcast. I always ask my guests, Antonio, I highly recommend that the project managers or anybody interested in understanding a little bit about project management, or even, staff members working in an organization, be interested in what's coming your way, because it will impact the way you operate. It will impact the way you run the business. It will impact your promotion and your performance as well. But one thing that I want to ask you, and obviously I'm focused more on the change management or change practice side of it, what would be your advice to the change practitioners community?
I would say, to be honest, is to a bit similar. Step up, take ownership of leading change, which probably they did during the pandemic. They were in the spotlight. So don't discard learning project management. Don't disregard agile methods. I think it's going to make you stronger. It's not about just one method. The world is about learning different methods. So I think develop those areas, which I'm sure most of them they have anyway. But then I think it's what we were talking about. Claim your spot as the leader in the project economy, the one that makes change happen. And I think that's my advice to all your listeners.
Thank you, Antonio. Claim your spot. That can be a good title for your next book, Antonio.
Thank you.
I'm grateful for your time. How would people get hold of a copy of your book, and how would people reach you?
Yeah, sure. I think my book is in most bookstores and Amazons and virtual stores. And you can reach me through my website, Nieto-Rodriguez.com, or LinkedIn, mostly to join my newsletter. I have every week a topic, and I have two LinkedIn online courses, which are very simple, an hour, one for sponsors, one for non-PMs, just going a bit deeper on this concept. So today is very easy to reach out. So I hope you do. And I hope we can keep in touch, Ali. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much. And we're going to put all your details in the podcast anyway, Antonio. It's been a pleasure having you. And as we talked about before the recording started, I'd love to have you back again sometime in February or March next year. There's a lot of stuff in your book that I would like to cover and really worthwhile listening to. So I'll give you a break for a few months and I'll have you back but it's been really pleasure, and I'm grateful for your time, Antonio. And until next time, stay well and stay safe.
Thank you. Likewise, Ali. I will continue for a few hours. So yes, please reach out anytime.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Inner Game of Change podcast. To know more about our guests and this episode, check out the innergameofchange.com.au website. And remember to subscribe. I can't wait to share with you the next episode. Until then, stay well and stay safe.